Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me to this awesome event. It's actually my first time at the Game UX Summit, and I'm having a blast. So thank you, everyone, for being here. For those who don't know me, so yeah, my name is Jennifer. You can also call me Jane. The name is Invincible Jane. Don't ask me why. And I work as a games journalist, so I am lucky to talk about video games every week at the international French radio. It's called RFI, which is super cool. I also like to do content creation just for fun about gaming. I'm also a games activist, like Celia just mentioned. I founded a non-profit called Afrogameuses, and I'm involved in like several organizations that are all about basically seeing Black people thrive in gaming, because that's my thing. And I was also, by the way, in terms of background, I was born in Togo, West Africa, raised in Benin, and then I grew up in France, and I never left since, I guess. What else? In terms of my professional background, I used to work as a social media and content manager at Ubisoft, and then I worked for other indie studios because, yeah, social media is fun, and I like to work with it. And on the side of all of that, I like to do some cultural consulting to basically help game developers create better games. That's how I like to think of it. Okay. I'm going to ask you first a question. So has anybody here already called upon or already worked as a sensitivity reader? Assuming that you know what it is, have you already called for one? Okay, one, wow. Two, we got two, another one, third maybe? Okay, good. That is very good. Then I'm going to ask you another question. You don't have to answer straight away, but could you imagine maybe making a movie, you know, about the French Revolution without a French historian? You don't have to answer. Can you also imagine maybe making a Northern mythology game without hiring an expert? Can you imagine making an accessible game, an accessible website, you know, you're a UX designer also, without including disabled people in the making of it? If your answer is yes, you might want to rethink this. But it's also an answer that I will accept, because I actually think that you can do that. It's just that you have to accept the fact that the product you're trying to create will be of a lesser quality. It's not going to be as good as it should be, or it could be, right? It's actually the same when you're trying to tell the stories of minorities when it comes to, you know, creating games. Your story, if it doesn't include minorities but does portray minorities, will be of a lesser quality because you lack the perspective, you lack the experience, you lack the authenticity, right? And so it's just like what my uncle Denzel Washington said. He says it's not about color, right? He says it's about culture. He was asked for the movie Fences why the movie needed to have a black director and not a white director. And he said, yeah, this is not a thing about color. It's about culture. It's about perspective. It's about experience. And this is what gives the movie such a great taste, right? And the thing is, you probably don't own that kind of color, culture, expertise in your studios, because most studios nowadays look like this. Correct me if I'm wrong, obviously. It's not necessarily a bad thing, right? But we do know that there is a lack of diversity in our game dev studios nowadays. So that is actually where sensitivity reading comes into play. And sensitivity reading is not about, you know, forcing DEI like I might have seen on social media. It's not about forcing the inclusion or the portrayal of Black, people of color, LGBTQIA+ communities, or disabled people. It is not about that. It's also not about, you know, censoring you and your creativity as devs. It's also not about judging you, for the simple reason that, well, you're humans, right? And you are biased, and we are all biased, right? Finally, it's not about making you go woke or go broke, because, well, we're not here to extort your money, and we're not here to force you into adopting a certain agenda or political agenda, right? What it is about, though, I like to break it down into 4 things for me. The first thing is about making your story believable. So therefore, like creating immersion, making sure that people can actually imagine themselves in the world that you're creating. It's about touching people's soul. I didn't find another way to say that, but I do think that whenever you're moved, whenever you feel touched by a story that you're being told, then it becomes more memorable to you because it directly speaks to your soul. And whenever I try to remember a story or a game that really moved me, that I really enjoyed, usually it's because the story was so good. I'm not gonna get into the debate between like gameplay and story, like this is not the point, right? What makes a good game? To me, it all comes down to a game that I will remember and a game that I'm going to enjoy. So sensitivity reading is also about preventing harmful representation, obviously. It's probably one of the first things that comes to mind when we think of that. And therefore, obviously, again, helping you kind of avoid the backlash that can happen on social media, right? And then the last thing, to me, from my perspective, sensitivity reading is about sharing knowledge, because if I help you detect harmful stereotypes, then for your next game, when you're confronted to that, maybe you will detect it by yourself. So the goal is to create a virtuous cycle where we can all learn from this and actually do better in the future. Again, it's all about actually creating quality content so that obviously your game can sell, but also because your game is good when in terms of authenticity, in terms of storytelling, gameplay, etc., etc. And so in the end, one thing that people forget, and I want to give that reminder, is that doing sensitivity reading, or at least caring about that, is also a business argument, because in the end, it's about improving the quality of your game by making it memorable. So here are some of the areas where I work on when it comes to sensitivity reading. I wanted to give you some examples of how I managed to help some of the game developers that came to me. So we have, for instance, one dev who came to me with his whole lore Bible, right? And he told me, okay, so my game is a fantasy game that depicts slavery. I was like, okay, so what's the issue? And he was like, well, I'm using a couple terms and I'm not sure that it's going to be okay to use these terms in my game, right? And because it's a fantasy game, I don't want people to, because of these terms that I'm using, to think back of reality. I want them to remain in the game, but I don't know if I can use these terms in my game. So basically what I did was, get through it with him, reread everything that he had to say, and give him my perspective on how using these terms specifically might affect people or how they might feel about that. Therefore, giving him feedback on specifically what that would do. Sensitivity reading is also about helping you in your character design. For example, I've had this guy who once told me that he wanted to create a character with a green color of skin, but originally he wanted the character to be black. And so he couldn't make a decision. He didn't know what to do. Like, he thought it was important to have a dark-skinned character, but at the same time, it was fantasy, so he was a bit torn. And so we looked at this together, and what I did was basically ask him a bunch of questions, like, why do you want the character to be green or black? What prevents you from making him, why not black, right? What is the reason why you want to go for this? And just by questioning him, we managed to identify the reasons why he had those hesitations, and I managed to just help him make a clearer decision. So again, sensitivity reading, or like working with consultants, isn't about forcing you to take an idea, it's about giving you perspective so that you can make your own decisions in the end. It's about improving your world building, improving your cultural authenticity. So whenever you want to create, for instance, buildings, environments with oriental looking building just because it's cool, I might come in and tell you, okay, what you're doing here might be taken as Orientalism, and this is how it's going to be perceived by a certain group of people. This is what I like to do. It's also about helping you prevent harmful stereotypes, misogynistic, sexist, racist stereotypes and things like that, and seeing that as early as possible in in the development of the game. It's about making clearer creative choices sometimes. And one thing that I like to think is it can also even help with gameplay. For instance, I think one of the games that do this well is Assassin's Creed Liberation, Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation, which has a main character, Aveline de Grandpré, who's a mixed race, right? And she is the daughter of a slave and of a slave master. And she actually uses her identity in the gameplay of that Assassin's Creed game so that she can infiltrate certain environments. And this is one way where, integrating, for instance, a specific color of skin for a character is going to impact gameplay. But there are many other things that it can do. And lastly, but not the least, right? We can also help you do some communication check. Wow, what is happening? It's fine, yeah. One of the things that we can do also with sensitivity reading is about helping you prevent and manage backlash on social media. So the goal is really, to sometimes just give you some warnings about what might happen. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to happen, but at least you'll have all the information that will help you, again, prepare yourself and make clearer decisions. Now, I work with a lot of white people, and one of the top topics that scare white people is being racist when including non-white characters and doing cultural appropriation. Now, I'm here to give you a kind reminder that you can have non-white people in your game without being racist or doing cultural appropriation. So, why not play just a quick game where I will give you some cases of games, and you will tell me if you think this game is doing cultural appropriation or not. Yeah? You in? Let's go. Are you really in, though? Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. So, raise your hand if you think the game Shifu, have you played Shifu? If you think Shifu is a good example of cultural appropriation. Raise your hand if you think so. Would you think it's appreciation instead? So basically, Shifu is a game about kung fu, right? They're paying a tribute to martial arts, like Chinese martial arts. All right, let me tell you what I think. I think Shifu is actually a case of cultural appreciation, but gone wrong, done wrong. Therefore, it becomes appropriation. Why? Because the game is based on Chinese martial arts, right? It is also made by a French white team based in France, and they're trying to, give the love of the kung fu in the game. The problem for me is that Shifu is basically trying to pass for a Chinese game when they're absolutely not Chinese, they're definitely French. And there are a lot of in-game problems, right? They have localization mistakes that were flagged by Chinese people. They have issues of cultural representation in-game as well. And I think there is a big issue of lack of transparency because at no point in time during development, they told people what they were doing. They weren't transparent about how they were making this game. There were no Chinese people involved in the development of this game. There was no Chinese culture consultant or experts involved when making this game either. Or if there was, they did not communicate at all about this, so you cannot find that information online. And in the end, to me, what this screams is we can make a game about you without you. The issue of Shifu is also about commercializing a culture that is not yours and not retributing the culture itself. That is what makes it cultural appropriation. So this is one example that shows you that you also gotta be careful how you're doing things, right? If they had at least tried to collaborate with Chinese people to actually make this game, the perception would be a bit different, right? I think one of the things that also shows this is the Shifu's creator kit when the game was released, because the creator kit just contains cultural elements that are transformed into marketing materials, just marketing tools. And that can be insulting to a lot of Chinese people as well. So they were oblivious to ethics while making the game, and they wanted to be judged only on the content of the game. And sure, the game is good, right? I played it, I loved it. But what happens while making the game, the creation and the development process also matters when it is to determine whether this is harming or not, if this is cultural appropriation or appreciation. You understand the game now? Yeah. Then you can answer for that one. Life is Strange True Colors. Have you played it? Anybody knows it? Okay. So, Life is Strange True Colors. So in that one, we have the representation of an Asian American hero. It also, discusses the topics of mental health and the representation of bisexuality. What I like with this game, first of all, I think it is a good example of cultural appreciation, right? What I like about it is the fact that, sure, our main character is a woman and she's Asian American, but the game isn't about her being Asian, actually. And this is well balanced. Why is it well balanced? Because both the actress playing her, the character Alex, and the lead writer are Asian, but they didn't make the whole game and the whole character about her Asianness. They found a real good balance between her identity and whatever it is that she does in the game. Also, because they cared about being accurate and giving an authentic experience of bisexuality and of mental health and adoption, they actually worked with cultural consultants, and they also worked with healthcare professionals to make sure to render like a good experience of what it's like, right? So that's why one of the things that I like also about this is you can find plenty of online interviews or articles about their development process in this. You can find the fact that their writer is Asian. You can see that they tried to collaborate not just on their own while making this game, but to actually work with other people to render a good and accurate experience again. Now, last but not least, game that I want us to review together. Anybody played South of Midnight? Yes? Okay, of course, obviously. All right, so do we think this is an example of cultural appropriation or appreciation, at least for those who have played it? Appreciation? David? I shouldn't be asking you, he made the game, basically. Obviously, it is indeed a good example of cultural appreciation because we have a group of Canadian, mostly a group of white men, right? Who are making a game with an African-American character living in the South. The game is doing an amazing work in terms of immersion and in terms of character development. And one of the things that I really loved about it is, again, that their process, you can find their process in the way they wanted to address this online, because they actually worked with a lot of diverse teams, right? They worked with the Black employees at Xbox. They also, and that's the part that I guess I enjoy the most, they also worked with a lot of Black local musicians, voice actors and artists, etc. Again, the collaborational part of this is really what brings a lot of authenticity and culture to the game. They hired consultants, and they showed a lot of transparency in the development of the project. And I personally think it's the game of the year. I'm not biased at all. Not just because the character is Black, but because I'm not even American. I'm French, And I could relate to her in many ways. And because the story was so good, it's a game that really moved me and actually touched my soul, which made it a memorable game for me. And this is a good example, again, of how a team of white people, can make a game with Black people without being racist or without doing cultural appropriation. Next. I want to just give a quick reminder about the fact that these discussions will continue to exist, right? A lot of studios are still facing backlash today, whether they're big or small. Being a small studio doesn't prevent you from actually receiving backlash because of the decisions you are making in the game. Just recently, like, we had this character in Tekken who was released, who is just basically an over-sexualized, exotic Malagasy teen in the latest Tekken 8 game, which obviously, you know, created a bunch of discussions online. And obviously, as a studio, well, if you care about your image, you want to pay attention to that kind of stuff because it is something that can also harm you as a developer, right? Now that I've said all of that, let's see together how working with a sensitivity reader actually looks like. So I did a quick table of, well, to me, it's just like a two-way collaboration, right? There are requirements from devs and also from readers or consultants. The number one thing that I think you should take into consideration is really, when you're a dev, about showing humility and accepting that there are a lot of things that you don't know, being open-minded and trusting the person, the consultant that you are working with, because it is based, their feedback really is based on experience, right? There is no degree that will tell you about how to do sensitivity reading. There's no degree in that, so it's really important to like build that trust with the person. And on the other hand, as consultants or sensitivity readers, it's important for us to give constructive feedback and not just tell you that your game is trash and never play a game or make a game again. That is not how it should be working from my perspective. Again, it comes from a place of no judgment, and instead it comes from a place where the goal is to help you also build that knowledge for your future games and the stories that you want to tell. I like to remind people also that it's important to reaching out as early as possible, because I have so many people come to me at the end of production, ask for feedback, and then like whenever I do so, I get paid obviously, but they can't actually change anything about the game. So it doesn't really matter anymore. And sometimes people use the fact that they work with consultants as a, how can I say this, as an argument to say, hey, so we've done this, this was approved or not approved, this was approved by the consultant that we worked with, so yeah, it's not on us, it's on the consultant who actually maybe made some mistakes. Please don't do that. That would, that's not very respectful. So we're not gonna go over all of the requirements. You can take a picture of that if you want, but to me, I think those are the most important stuff. How do you find the right sensitivity reader to work with? Well, obviously, people usually don't see this, but at least in France, it's easy to find people around you. It's easy to find people from all backgrounds in Paris to help you like review, proofread your stuff, and give you feedback on this. And if you don't have that kind of friend or people around, do check online, but I think it's always best to go with somebody that you know who knows somebody else. Like peer review is going to help basically on that. Obviously, there's me, right? Me and my colleague Michael, we like to do this not full time, but it's something that we like to do and that we want to take to the next level also in the future. And if you have specific topics that you want to address, that you want to be reviewed in your game, there are plenty of people who can actually specialize, who do specialize in different topics, and that can help, right? I can't tell you anything about neurodiversity. I cannot tell you anything about the trans identity, for example. So do ask people who are who can relate to these experiences to give you feedback, right? If you want to give maybe the experience of a black woman in a game, well, don't go around and ask the first white man around you, right? It just makes sense to try and have somebody who actually can relate to that experience. So yeah, I want to give you a couple last takeaways of what I think you should remember, I guess, from this talk. Remember the fact that sensitivity reading is about making good and memorable games, again. It's both about ethics and business, right? Next time your boss doesn't want to go there, tell him that it's actually a business argument, right? It doesn't replace you from hiring diverse team, actually. Both are needed, right? Because if you hire me as a social media manager and then ask me to give you a consultancy, like a sensitivity review, I'm not sure that I would like to do it because my job is to be your social media manager and not like the token diversity person who will give you feedback on this. So please try and hire people whose expertise can actually help you through that. Again, telling the story of another culture is okay. Just do it with people from the said culture. This will always, always be so beneficial to you rather than just doing it on your own alone, because you might be pretending that you know it all. Despite all of the research that you can do on your own, it is always good and it always adds something to have somebody involved in this. Fifth point, nobody is free from backlash. Again, we've seen that over and over again, and it is okay to get help when there are certain things that you're not familiar with. Please go ahead and find people who can help you. And that is it for me. If you have some questions, I am here. Am I on time?
You're on time. Thank you so much for this very insightful talk. And it's always more beneficial to be inclusive and accessible. So we have a bunch of questions. I have some time. So why is it called sensitivity reading instead of something like cultural consulting or content culturalization? What is the reason behind the name?
So it's something that I forgot to say in the beginning. I had planned on doing that, but stress. Actually, you can call it whatever you want. It's the same thing anyway. The difference to me is like sensitivity reading comes from literature, right? Usually it's people reviewing books, so they just read scripts, etc. But what I do is both sensitivity reading and like checking characters, aesthetics, environments, world building, etc. So the best way that I put it, that's why I said in the beginning that I work as an authenticity or cultural consultant, is because I do both sensitivity reading and the rest, I guess. But like the words don't really matter. It's what you do that really matters, I think.
Sifu's team used Chinese consultants and didn't communicate around it. So how do you think they should have communicated around it?
Well, there are many examples of people who actually did that. So if we just take the example of South of Midnight that we talked about earlier, one thing that they did, it's not even necessarily about like having the consultants up front, right? Saying, look, we did that. It's about showing that you care, really. And there are many ways to show that you care about a specific culture, right? South of Midnight had a documentary where they had their teams talk about the game. They involved the black people in the game, and not just the black employees, you know. They had plenty of people show how much they care and show the research that they did. I know that one thing that I also really enjoy about the game and why it feels genuine is that it also come from the experience of David Sears, right? Who grew up in the South and wanted to actually just pay tribute to that area, right? And so there are many ways to care and to show that you care, making videos, like writing articles about it. Just make sure the information is accessible somewhere and so that people can find it, you know? Make a tweet, I don't know, like there are plenty of ways I think to do so.
Yeah, I would avoid Twitter, but you do you. What if a team does everything right but doesn't communicate it to the outside? Why is this transparency so important? A little bit around the same topic.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Transparency is important because it will help you with yourself in your own, like, feeling comfortable with your own decisions of making the game and like paying tribute to that said culture, right? It will help the others. What you want is to kind of have a little bit of control on the perception of the work that you're putting out there, right? So to me, showing transparency is a way to have people easily find information online. As a person of color, for example, when I see one thing that I do whenever I see a game with a black character, I'm like, oh, who actually made this game? So I'm gonna go and check. Who are the people behind this game? Why? because I'm a person of color and it's something that does matter to me, you know? I want to know if it's a black dev that's behind it, because if that's the case, that would be mind-blowing to me and I will appreciate that so much, right? And if it's not, it's always also good for me to know, right? But I do want to know like the process behind it. I will be a little bit more attentive, I guess, if it's not a black dev behind it. It doesn't mean I'm gonna love the game less. It just means that I want to have that level of information, so also I can make like clear decisions, I guess. Does that answer the question?
And I guess one last question before the break. How do you leverage people from a particular background without tokenizing them or appropriating their identity for gain?
So it comes back to what we were saying earlier, just work with these people, I guess. It's always the best decision to make in the end, like have these people get involved in the creation process. It's just the easiest way and the easiest part, and it's just not so difficult to do, to be honest. And, you know, they will feel valued, that their opinion is being reflected in this, that their experience is being reflected. Yeah, just work with people.
Awesome. I think we need to go to the break now so that we can finish on time. Thank you so much, Jennifer.